So in this video, I would like to explain how to conjugate verbs in the future tense in Russian. The future tense in Russian talks about events that will happen in the future, and it doesn't have any continuous or progressive future tenses. However, Russian does have the perfective and imperfective, which work a bit differently in the future than the other tenses. Unlike the past and present, the perfective and imperfective function in a simple and compound way, known as the future simple and future compound in Russian. Essentially, Russian has one tense of the future, but the perfective is the simple form, while the imperfective is the compound form. The future simple form is made using perfective verbs with the help of verb endings that are taken from the present tense, depending on the verb's ending. In the future simple, you're expected to see verbs that borrow the same conjugations from the present tense, just with a perfective aspect. They could have a prefix, a letter change, an infix, or simply be an exception, but overall, they borrow the same verb endings and conjugations from the present, again depending on the verb's ending. The future compound form is made using imperfective verbs, and it's compound because this aspect uses two words, a conjugated form of the verb быть in the future and an infinitive in the imperfective aspect. Similarly, the future compound form in Russian is identical to the future progressive in English, and you're about to see how. As I said in the previous video, the verb быть is a stative verb, meaning that it's always active and continuous. The imperfective aspect in Russian is also always active and continuous. Therefore, it is possible to use it in the future and only in the imperfective aspect, which is the future compound, consisting of two words. The perfective, which is the future simple, cannot use быть. The conjugations of быть in the future compound, which is the imperfective, are very similar to the first conjugation pattern for verbs in the present tense. In the future compound, they will look like this. Я буду, ты будешь, он, она, оно будет, мы будем, вы будете, они будут. Every conjugation is basically the same as the first conjugation pattern in the present, except я and они, which use u instead of you. However, the meaning of these words is not I will, you will, he will. The meaning is I will be doing, you will be doing, and so on. The reason why is because we're working in the imperfective future compound. It is compound because it is similar to the future progressive in English, and also it uses two words. First, it's a subject of any kind, a conjugated form of быть that fits the subject, and an infinitive in the imperfective aspect. That's how the future compound works in Russian. Now, let's see the future simple. The grammar for the future simple is actually simpler than the future compound. All we do is take a perfective form of a verb and conjugate it to fit the subject. But more importantly, the conjugations in the future simple basically borrow the same verb endings from the present tense, depending on the verb's ending. The verb itself, however, can have a prefix, a letter change, an infix, or be an exception in the future simple. But the verb endings and conjugations will be the same as in the present. To make practice more legitimate, I'll be showing examples using verbs from the previous video, along with exceptions and irregulars. So let's get into it. Let's practice on the verbs работать and поработать. These verbs mean to work, and they end in at. In the future compound, the imperfective aspect will be used using a subject, a conjugated form of быть, and an infinitive. In the future compound, the conjugations will look like this. Я буду работать, ты будешь работать, он, она, оно будет работать, мы будем работать, вы будете работать, and они будут работать. We have the subjects, conjugations of быть that fit the subjects, and then an infinitive. Because it's the imperfective future compound, the meaning of these phrases is I will be working, you will be working, and so on. This is how verb conjugation works in the future compound in Russian. It's similar to the future progressive because of the imperfective, indicating an action that is continuous, ongoing, and stative, which is why the verb быть is used. Now, let's see the future simple. Because the perfective is used, быть will not be used in the future simple. Быть is always stative and continuous in any tense, so the perfective, which indicates a completed action in the future, cannot use the verb быть. Instead, perfective verbs may have prefixes, infixes, letter changes, or simply be exceptions, and these verbs will have the same conjugations as in the present. Поработать is a verb in the perfective, and in the future simple it will look like this. Я поработаю Ты поработаешь. Он, она, оно поработает. Мы поработаем. Вы поработаете. And они поработают. Поработать in the perfective future simple indicates an action that will be finished successfully. So the meanings are I will work, you will work, and so on. Additionally, because pоработать ends in at, its endings are borrowed from the first conjugation pattern of verbs in the present, just with the prefix po. This pattern will obviously change depending on the verb's ending, but still, the perfective will always utilize verb endings and conjugations from the present. The only difference is that a perfective verb can have a prefix, an infix, a letter change, or be an exception in the future, while also borrowing the same endings as in the present, depending on the verb's ending. This is how verb conjugation works in the perfective future simple. So let's have some more examples. Here we have гулять and погулять. They mean to take a walk, and they end in ять. In the imperfective future compound, we have subjects, conjugations of быть that fit the subject, and an infinitive of гулять. Я буду гулять, I will be taking a walk. Ты будешь гулять, you will be taking a walk, and so on. In the perfective future simple, we have погулять, which is conjugated by taking the same endings from the first conjugation pattern from the present, only with the prefix по. Я погуляю, I will take a walk. Ты погуляешь, you will take a walk, and so on. Here we have сидеть and посидеть. They mean to sit, and they end in ять. In the perfective future compound, we have subjects, the verb быть, and an infinitive of сидеть. Я буду сидеть, I will be sitting. Ты будешь сидеть, you will be sitting, and so on. In the perfective future simple, we have посидеть, which is conjugated using the second conjugation pattern from the present, only with the prefix по. Я посижу, I will sit. Ты посидишь, you will sit, and so on. Let's not forget that there are spelling rules for stems of verbs in the я pronoun that have to be made for a better sound. Посидеть is a verb that's affected by that, so we have to change de to je in the я pronoun. These spellings will change depending on the verb's ending, which is why it's important to know present verb conjugation along with spelling rules because they are necessary in the future simple. Here we have говорить and поговорить. They mean to speak and they end in it. In the imperfective future compound, the conjugations are я буду говорить, I will be speaking. Ты будешь говорить, you will be speaking, and so on. In the perfective future simple, we have поговорить, which is conjugated by taking the endings from the second conjugation pattern from the present. Luckily, поговорить is not affected by any spelling rules. Я поговорю, I will speak. Ты поговоришь, you will speak, and so on. Here we have возвращать and вернуть. They mean to return, and while the imperfective has a common ending, the perfective verb ends in ut, so it will utilize an irregular conjugation. In the imperfective future compound, we have я буду возвращать, I will be returning. Ты будешь возвращать, you will be returning, and so on. Now, even though it's possible to say these phrases, they're really not formal or conversational, both in English and Russian, so it doesn't make sense to use this verb in the future compound. Instead, the perfective future simple is a better way where this verb can be used, but the conjugations are different. Я верну, I will return. Ты вернешь, you will return, and so on. We have irregular spellings where the vowel ye changes to yo when the stress falls off the stem's ending. Also, we're using u instead of you in the ya and ani pronouns, but still, all of these conjugations are based on the first conjugation pattern from the present, so there is a connection. Here, we have колоть and уколоть. They mean to prick and they end in ot. Even though it's not a common ending, they do follow the first conjugation pattern from the present. In the imperfective future compound, we have я буду колоть, I will be pricking. Ты будешь колоть, you will be pricking, and so on. In the perfective future simple, we have уколоть, which is conjugated by taking the endings from the first conjugation pattern from the present. Luckily, уколоть is not affected by any spelling rules. Я уколю, I will prick, ты уколешь, you will prick, and so on. Here we have мыть and помыть. They mean to wash, and they end in it. It is also not a common ending, but it does follow the regular first conjugation pattern from the present. In the imperfective future compound, we have я буду мыть, I will be washing, ты будешь мыть, you will be washing, and so on. In the perfective future simple, we have помыть, which is conjugated by taking the endings from the first conjugation pattern from the present. But we have to add the vowel o so that the words sound better. Я помою, I will wash. Ты помоешь, you will wash, and so on. Finally, we made it to one of the last endings that verbs have, which is t. There are not that many verbs that end in t, but most verbs are irregular and have spelling rules, like iti and paiti, meaning to go. Even though these verbs typically follow the first conjugation pattern from the present, they can have changes in spelling. In the imperfective future compound, we have я буду идти, I will be going, ты будешь идти, you will be going, and so on. In the perfective future simple, we have the same conjugations as in the present, but with the prefix po, while using yo instead of ye in most pronouns and u instead of you in the ya and ani pronouns. Я пойду, I will go, ты пойдешь, you will go, and so on. There are also нести and понести. They both mean to carry and they end in t. In the imperfective future compound, we have я буду нести, I will be carrying, ты будешь нести, you will be carrying, and so on. In the perfective future simple, we have понести, which has many irregular aspects. Even though it uses the first conjugation pattern from the present, it has u instead of you in the ya and ani pronouns, ye is replaced with yo, and we have the prefix po. Я понесу, I will carry. Ты понесешь, you will carry, and so on. Besides these verbs, there could be more, like лежать and лечь. They mean to lie down, but the perfective version ends in yech. It is a very rare ending, causing many irregular changes, but it does follow the first conjugation pattern from the present. In the imperfective future compound, we have я буду лежать, I will be lying down. Ты будешь лежать, you will be lying down, and so on. In the perfective future simple, we have лечь, which has many irregular aspects. Even though it uses the first conjugation pattern from the present, it has u instead of you in the ya and ani pronouns, ge replaces che in the ya and ani pronouns, ya replaces ye, and je replaces che in the rest of the pronouns. All of this is done to make better sounds when the words are said, so лечь is very irregular in the future. Я лягу, I will lie down. Ты ляжешь, you will lie down, and so on. Other verbs can be мочь and смочь. They mean to be able to or can, and they end in och, a rare ending that follows the first conjugation pattern from the present. In the imperfective future compound, there's actually no way to put мочь in the future, because it is logically not possible to say I will can. Instead, it is only used in the perfective aspect, but it does have many irregular changes. Following the first conjugation pattern from the present, it has u instead of you in the ya and ani pronouns, ge replaces che in the ya and ani pronouns, je replaces che in the rest of the pronouns, and there is the prefix se. All of this is done to make better sounds, so смочь is very much irregular in the future. Я смогу, I will be able to. Ты сможешь, you will be able to, and so on. There could be more irregular perfective verbs in the future simple, but it's not that important to know all of them, considering that they're all built on conjugations in the present. In conclusion, this is how verb conjugation works in the future tense in Russian. There is the imperfective future compound, which uses conjugations of быть and regular imperfective infinitives. The only tough part is knowing how to conjugate быть, so that's about it. Also, there is the perfective future simple, which uses verbs in the perfective aspect and takes conjugations from the present. The tough part about the perfective is knowing how to identify a perfective verb and knowing what spelling rules come with what verb ending, considering again that they all come from the present tense. It's important to not forget them and watch out for them. But anyway, in case you don't know which future tense to use, using the imperfective will always be simpler, faster to remember, and more understandable.